Hello and welcome to Women in Post, a podcast and web series for women in post-production by Women in Post-Production. Today on the show, we'll be speaking with Katie.
It's a really good idea to get involved in these organizations because you meet other people who are like you, and that's where we'll often hear that people have hired their crew.
Okay, so today on the podcast, we have Katie Chambers. She's the Community Engagement Director with New York Women in Film and Television. Katie, you guys have, 2,500 members in New York City, right?
That's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the organization and what you guys are up to these days?
Sure. So New York Women in Film and Television, or NYWIFT for short, it's a big long name, so we shorten it to NYWIFT, was founded in 1977. It was actually founded on July 13th, 1977. We know that specifically because that was the date of the Great New York City Blackout. So while this amazing group of 10 to 15 women were meeting in a New York City apartment to talk about parity and the need for inclusion in the entertainment industry, all the lights went out all across New York City. And we always say that we think it was the lady power in that room that caused the Great New York City Blackout of 1977. But it did start then with a group of about 10 women and grew from there into the robust nonprofit organization that we are today, with 2,500 members strong. We're part of a network of more than 50 women in film chapters worldwide, all part of something called Women in Film and Television International. The NYWIFT chapter, the New York chapter, is actually the biggest of all of the women in film chapters with the 2,500 members. I'd say there are about more than 15,000 people in all the chapters combined worldwide. We welcome men as well as women at this point. We don't want to have an organization that advocates for equality and then tells 50% of the population they can't come in the room, for sure. But obviously most of our members, of course, are women. To give you just an overview of what we do, we work in 4 areas. So we produce professional development programs, about 50 a year for our members. We advocate for equality in the entertainment industry across the board, intersectional equality, obviously with an eye towards gender inclusion, but we also talk about racial and ethnic diversity, sexual orientation, the whole lot. We also provide funds for women filmmakers and preserve films by women, and we celebrate women's achievements throughout the year through our social media and then also through 2 award shows that we do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the overview of what we do. A lot of what we do actually usually happens in person. So I'm talking to you right now in the middle of the coronavirus crisis, where it's a very different situation. I'm coming to you from my bedroom rather than from my office, which is where I initially planned to talk to you guys today. But we are moving a lot of our programming online. So a lot of what we do right now is virtual. And then when we can get back in person, we will.
Right. You guys have a lot of events that occur throughout the year. So are you continuing those virtually right now?
We are. So we do about 50 plus professional development programs and networking events a year. So most of it is still happening online. Our members, it really runs the gamut. It's a lot of directors and producers, of course, a lot of filmmakers, but also we have writers, we have below the line crew, we have people in post-production, we have editors, casting directors, actors, film professors, TV critics. It really is a mix. So our programming reflects that career diversity. So we'll do workshops about editing, about color correcting, about how to cast a sitcom, how to land your first TV writing gig, workshops about how to do your taxes as a freelancer, really anything that affects the careers of women in the business. We want to provide professional development so that they have all the tools possible so that they can succeed. So those things usually happen in person in New York. I know your audience actually isn't entirely in New York. So in this case, it's actually a benefit because everything we're doing right now is virtual and accessible to everybody. So if you go onto our website, which is nywift.org, you can see where we're listing our upcoming webinars. We just launched a new series called NYWIFT Talks, which is a weekly series that talks about how the COVID-19 crisis is affecting the industry. There's been a hiring freeze. A lot of freelancers are out of work. A lot of productions are on hold. So we're talking about how that's affecting the industry, but also how people are moving forward anyway and coming up with new ways to screen things virtually and have virtual theatrical distribution, and how to make the most out of a Zoom conference call for all the people that are not used to working from home before. So that is all on our website. It's free for our paying members to log into Zoom in person and view it live, but then we're putting it online for the whole public afterwards for everybody to view later.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So question on that, because you guys are in New York and there are different chapters, right, in
Correct.
different places. What is the geographical region that people typically come to your chapter? And if somebody is watching online now and are thinking, well, I want to participate in this, but I'm in, Boise, Idaho or somewhere,
Right.
is it worth their time to join a region that's not local to them?
Mm-hmm. It is right now with everything being online, but I would suggest that you do definitely check out to see if you have a local chapter. Again, there are more than 50. So we serve the tri-state area, so New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, with the majority of our members being in New York. That said, we recognize that a lot of people in the business work in more than one city. So we do have a dual membership where you can join our organization at a reduced rate if you're already a member of a different chapter, say Atlanta or LA or Seattle or the DC chapter, which is very active, the UK chapter, New Zealand, they're all over the place. So yes, you can take advantage of our membership if you're not here, in that we have an online membership directory where you could be listed, where you can also, as a member, have full access to reach out and search for people. We have a job board, which has mostly jobs in New York, but not entirely, and that's open to our members as well as, the basic membership benefits of, gym memberships, insurance options. So that's all a good reason to join if you're not here. But no, I would say that, when in normal circumstances, when we're able to meet in person, majority of our programming is live and in person in New York City. Although we did do our first ever event at Park City, Utah, and Sundance this year. So we do events outside of the city as well.
Okay. If it wasn't COVID-19 shelter in place and somebody was thinking, okay, is it time for me to join an organization? What point in someone's career is it time for them to join?
I suggest as early as possible. For us at NIWIFT, we have, to be a full member, you have to have had at least 4 years of experience past entry level to get full membership. But we do have a next wave program for people who are just starting out, who have maybe just 1 or 2 professional credits. But I think that, especially in this industry, with so much of it being about connections, networking is really a lifelong commitment. And it's really good to start meeting people as early as possible. We also find that, even though you think Hollywood and you think movie stars and you think, oh, these people are super outgoing, the majority of the film industry seems to be made up of introverts, myself included. I'm sure a lot of the post-production folks that are listening to this as well can relate. And it's a really good idea to get involved in these organizations because you meet other people who are like you and who are in similar situations. And I find that the networking tends to be a little bit less high pressure. It's a little bit more of equals meeting on equal terms, and everybody knows that they're there for the same reason. You don't have to feel awkward going up to somebody. When you join a professional association that's geared towards a specific career, you already have so much in common that you can talk about, and it's a really good way to meet people and make those connections. You can't make films at home in a bubble. You have to go out and meet other people. And we'll frequently hear that we do these monthly networking parties called the NIWIFT Night Out, where they take place at various bars throughout the city. And everybody's always laughing at me because I'm the person who's in charge of curating them. And I don't drink and I don't like parties and I don't like large crowds. And now I'm in charge of the NIWIFT Night Out, which is hysterical and kind of sad, but a good example of someone who's not made for this, who is totally comfortable going out to these. And that's where we'll often hear that people have hired their crew. They go with their indie film in mind, and they go to the night out and they start talking about it, and they find their grip and they find their DP, and they put their crew together there. Mm-hmm. So I do think that having a community like that is good. And then when you add to it that we all have something in common, that, as women in the industry, there's a lot of discrimination and there's a lot of frustration, and it gives you a safe space to talk about that with someone who can almost talk to you about it in shorthand, because they understand better than anybody else what kind of problems you might have had, and might have some solutions that you might not have thought of if you were just dealing with it on your own.
Yeah. There's a report on your website. You guys have tons of information on the website, just in general, but one of them in particular was...
We have something called the status of women in the industry on our website, which is what you're referring to, Kristen. Where we list under the resources section all of the different studies that have come out in recent years. Actually, I say in recent years, but I think we have them going back like more than a decade about how things are changing or not changing for inclusion in the industry. So if you're ever doing a report about that and you need resources, come to us because we've got them all on one page for you.
Yeah, and some of the numbers are pretty staggering. One of the things I found very interesting about that report is you compare how women in post-production are a part of the industry when the director is either male or female. And the numbers are drastically different. I think it's like only 19% are women when it's a male director, and it's something like high 40% when it's a female director. Never would have thought of that. Like, that's so, and it's, resources like that open people's eyes to what's going on.
It's something we talk about a lot, that people, humans, and this goes for men and women in all races, just naturally tend to hire people that remind them of themselves, which is just a basic human bias. But when you only then have older white men that are hiring, your crew is going to start to look just like that. And we find that the more diverse crews tend to be hired by more diverse people. And it's important to have people like that in those leadership positions. And again, that's yet another reason, though, why we make sure that we have men who are members of our organization as well, to try to break that habit and make sure that they're meeting these vastly diverse crews and encourage them to, break outside the box in their hiring. But yeah, women hire women.
What would you say to somebody who was maybe an old white man who just said, I spend this much time with one person in a dark room editing a film. I need that person to be a male because it would just be inappropriate and uncomfortable for me to spend that much time with a woman.
That's his problem. That's I always say when they say, oh, well, I couldn't help myself, or, oh, it's setting myself up for failure. It's like, if you have that little control over yourself, the problem is not who's in the room with you. The problem is you. And it is tricky. We talk about that a lot. And that's actually something that was addressed back when the Harvey Weinstein allegations first came out in October 2017. Our then board president, Simone Pirro, was actually invited to speak in front of the New York City Human Rights Commission for one of their first ever, and I think it was 40 years, hearings that they had on sexual harassment. And she talked about the unique situation of the entertainment industry, because it is almost like a lifestyle on top of being a business, that those lines can get easily blurred, and people are spending large amounts of time together. They're, all hours of the day, working late into the night in close quarters, eating all their meals together. And it starts to feel more like a friend situation than a professional situation. But you always have to remember that it's a job. And the more people can talk about it, and I think the more that it becomes less of a secret, the easier it's going to be, to set boundaries and to talk openly, and to have, no matter how small the production, to always have a chain of command and have resources available to someone that feels like they might have a problem.
Do you ever foresee, I know we don't have like a crystal ball here or anything, but like,
I wish we did.
If we could change things so that there weren't so many demanding hours in a day, if we like restructured that element or made more virtual work opportunities so people are editing in their darkroom by themselves from their own homes, like, would that open up more opportunities for women and for people of diverse backgrounds?
Absolutely. It absolutely would, on multiple levels, because it would help in that, first of all, a lot of times we find that there's an economic barrier to breaking into the industry, that you have to be able to live in an expensive metropolitan area. You have to not need access to a survival job so that you can work, 18 hours a day on minimum wage doing these grunt crew positions. It's only a certain demographic of person that's able to do that. And even when they're talking about hiring at the agencies and at the studio level, they're finding that it's these young, rich white kids that are able to get these jobs because they have their parents basically bankrolling them to get these glorified internship positions. And that's a requirement to breaking into the industry. So first of all, by paying better and by having better hours, then yes, you're opening it up to a greater diverse population. People from all different backgrounds, all different economic backgrounds would have access. For women specifically, the pay and the hours come into effect because women still in our society tend to be primary caregivers to children and to elders. And, there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. If that's what a woman wants to do, then that's what she should be allowed to do. But then work needs to accommodate that. And by expecting women to be on set for hours and hours and hours with no resources for childcare or no way to get home to care for an elderly parent, that's going to mean that that woman's going to have to choose between working and being a caregiver.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so there's sort of some organizations like Netflix are offering, benefits to help support women in that way.
Yeah.
But is it more prominent for people who are kind of below the line workers to not receive those same benefits that are being basically advertised to people who are seen first in the credits?
I don't know. I'd like to get more information about that. My gut says yes. I do. I can't speak to Netflix specifically. I don't know what their deal is, but I do know that a lot of times these benefits tend to affect the people that are seen more. They want to be able to show that, look, we had this famous actress on set and we helped her take care of her kid. But the production assistant that's doing all the work, I don't know that person is going to get the same benefit. One thing we are seeing is that a lot of change is happening in the entertainment industry, because the entertainment industry is somewhere that's seen by all people. Whereas other industries that may have the same inequality aren't getting the benefit of the publicity and therefore the call to action that's causing people to do it. So I can't speak to crew people specifically, but I do suspect that is something where they don't have possibly as much help, but at least they do have the benefits of being in a union. And I would always encourage people to go to their union for help with situations like that.
Mm-hmm, for sure. I know we don't have a lot of time left.
Okay.
There's two things that I think we really wanted to cover was success stories of people that are part of your organization and the in-kind production grants. And
Yes.
What is an in-kind production grant for people in post-production? What does that mean?
I can talk about that first. I'm being lazy and I'm pulling it up on our website since I have the computer in front of me, but we have several grants for people in the industry. If you go to our website and under resources, it's under Fund for Women Filmmakers. We do offer an in-kind post-production grant, which is it's not a cash grant. It is in-kind, which means it's a service where we give an online session or a sound mix to a documentary film directed and produced by New York area women filmmakers. We also have grants for a color grading session or a grant for audio description from Woman of Our Word, Michelle Spitz, who offers that also to the recipients of our Disability Awareness Grant. And again, talking about intersectional inclusion, we do have several opportunities available related to disability awareness. We always want to make sure that we're encouraging filmmakers to make their projects accessible to all. We recognize that audio description is costly. I hope that someday all films will have audio descriptions, and we're trying to offset that cost for at least some people.
And for some people who don't know what an audio description is,
yes.
Can you explain that?
So it's not just subtitles. An audio description is for someone who is blind or has trouble seeing the screen, and it provides an audio description of what you're seeing. So it's not just what the person is saying, but it's actually, so-and-so walks across the room and has a certain expression on their face. It's actually an art form in and of itself. There's a really good article out there, and I'm blanking on what publication it's in, but if you look up, Google audio description House of Cards, and they give a really good example of what the audio description for an episode of House of Cards looked like, or sounded like, I should say, and how it really dug into picking up on visual cues that in a scene where there was very little dialogue, but a lot was said by the actors' faces, and how this audio description really did justice to this complex scene so that someone that might not be able to see it could still enjoy it and understand the full experience of what was happening.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so the post-production grant is not like a cash fund given to
Correct.
Post-production people. It's we have resources. We'd like to help you with this part of the director's film. So post-production women, we need to connect with directors who are getting grants for their projects.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the success stories. I know that we've already talked about it between us, but let's share that with our audience.
Sure. So like I said, a lot of our members do take advantage of all the different resources, and we always encourage them to reach out to each other. I always point to one specific success story as a shining example. I have lots of little ones, but I always say this is the big one because it basically shows them using multiple elements of the NIWIFT organization to get what they need to make their project. But a few years ago, one of our members, Kate Cordelieu, who's an actress, went to one of our free screenings. So we offer 50 plus free screenings throughout the year, in addition to our regular programming, different advanced releases of upcoming films, things run by publicists and studios. This one in particular was of the documentary She's Beautiful When She's Angry, and the publicist for its on-demand release was actually someone who was on our board, Margarita Cortez. Margarita organized this screening at Anthology Film Archives. Kate, the actress, went to it. It sounded like fun. There was a 5-minute section in that film, maybe even shorter. It's about the history of the women's rights movement in the 60s. And this one section talked about the Jane Collective, which was a real-life group of women, college students in Chicago in the 1960s, who created an underground abortion ring in the days before Roe versus Wade. Kate was really inspired by that. She thought that it would make a great narrative film. So she was a member, still is a member, I think, of our New Works Lab group, which is one of the many affinity groups or offshoot groups of the NIWIFT membership that kind of just get together on their own and meet with their different interests. The New Works Lab is made up of actors, writers, and directors who all get together, and every other weekend they come to our office. And actually, I should say, right now they're doing it on Zoom. So even though they don't have access to our office, they're still going. But every other Saturday, they workshop different scripts. The actors will read them, work with the director. They get up, they do a 10-minute reading, they give instant feedback. They go away for 2 weeks. The writer comes back with edits, and it's a really good process. Kate brought the story to the New Works Lab, and they started to put together a script based on the Jane Collective. Long story short, a few months later, the New Works Lab went to do their huge annual reading for producers that we help organize and invite producers to. The script, which was now called Ask for Jane, was by far one of the best ones that they had, so they chose to show a 30-minute segment of that. There were several producers in the room who were interested. Kate, smart woman that she is, went on to our online membership directory and started to do research about what members are producers, what members are funders, and also what members were advocates and might be interested in funding a film about women's rights specifically. And she started emailing all of them. One of them happened to be Caroline Hirsch, the owner of Caroline's on Broadway, which is one of the biggest comedy clubs in New York City. She's also a huge women's rights advocate, and Caroline came on and she funded a lot of the film. So Kate and Rachel Carey, who was the director from the New Works Lab, went on. They made Ask for Jane, starring several NIWIFT members. It was Kate's producing debut. The costumes were designed by a NIWIFT member. There were NIWIFT members on the crew. They premiered at the Hamptons Film Festival. It screened all over the world. And, to bring it home, we actually had a screening of the film for our NIWIFT members as part of the NIWIFT member screening series this past fall, right back at Anthology Film Archives, which was the original venue where Kate had seen the original documentary and gotten the idea. So I always point as Ask to Jane as the ultimate NIWIFT success story. Kate used the New Works Lab group. She used the free screenings. She used the membership directory. She, networked with her fellow members and put together this incredible production, which also happens to be all about the women's rights movement.
We have to find a different place and a different front. We can't use our apartments anymore.
How do we pay for that?
We could charge the women $20, maybe $30 just to cover the apartment and the supplies.
Do we pay ourselves?
Like as employees?
I mean, this is work. I got fired from my other job, and I was already spending as much time here as there, so if you guys gave me a salary...
No. Why? Women's work is always undervalued. We're expected to just do things for free.
This is crazy. No, if we pay ourselves, we're not counselors, we're abortionists. That's already going to be the case.
So that's just a taste of some of the magic that can happen when you network at an organization like NIWIFT.
Yes, exactly.
That's amazing.
I didn't really talk about our advocacy too much. We do have an annual summit, which started last year under the leadership of our new executive director, Cynthia Lopez, who's been on board for a little over a year now. We did a summit on inclusion, equality, and safety with the support of the Ford Foundation, and we did it at the Ford Foundation's auditorium in New York City last June to great success. And we are actually going to have a publication summary of that coming out in the next few months, both online and in print, once our printer reopens, since the printer is closed due to the virus. But we're going to have our next summit, which may focus on the documentary space, and that's going to happen in the fall.
Right. And then we had talked about sexual harassment. And is that covered in this?
Yeah, it was covered in the one that we just did under the safety section. We actually had someone, Sharon Tahani, I believe her name is, from the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, and Amber Tamblyn from Time's Up and the Me Too movement talking about that and how to prevent it. And in addition, another resource that we do have, which I want to make everybody aware of, is we are partnered with our LA chapter, Women in Film Los Angeles, on their sexual harassment hotline. If you Google Women in Film Sexual Harassment Hotline, it'll come right up. And that is a free and totally confidential resource that's available. You can call during its hours, which are usually standard business hours. We actually partnered up with them to expand it to cover East Coast times as well. But you can get free legal advice and free support from a therapist if you, man or woman, have experienced any type of sexual harassment on set or think you might have, or have a question, you can call and get free confidential advice from this hotline.
And nobody's going to tell on you. Nobody's going to flag you.
Nope.
Okay, good. I just imagine that somebody's out there thinking like, okay, so what if I call this number? What can they possibly do for me? Like, you know what I mean? That's such a heavy situation. It is.
The people that are answering the phone, first of all, are trained in how to talk to people who might have experienced trauma. And, you know, they say what I always say about my job too, is that, you know, they might not be able to help you specifically, but they know the people that can, and they will help put you in touch with an attorney that might be an expert in your specific issue, with a therapist or a therapy group that might speak to your particular issues. So I always say, you know, if you're not sure whether or not you should call them and find out and let them know what's going on and let them direct you to the resources that they have available. And again, it's all safe and confidential.
Okay. Well, what are some of the things that we can look forward to in the next couple of months coming out from NYWIFT?
Yes. Well, we have lots of our NYWIFT talks coming up. If you go to nywift.org/events, you can see some of the seminars we have coming. It's going to be quite the robust month, all online. We actually have a really popular program called the Business of Adaptations for Film and TV, which we run a few times a year in person and always sells out right away. We are doing the webinar version. So I would definitely suggest, whether or not you are a member, that you do sign up for this. It talks, it's agents, Hollywood producers, and publishers are always searching for the next great story. And it's what the business and legal side is of adapting someone's life story or a magazine article or a book for film and TV.
Okay.
What else do we have? I'm actually going to be doing a webinar with one of my good friends, who's also one of our board members, a casting director, Destiny Lilly, who does casting for film, TV, and Broadway. I'm a former talent agent myself, so that's how I know her. And we're going to talk about how the casting community has been affected by the COVID-19 crisis, but also how they're carrying on, and, you know, best practices for online auditions, which honestly everybody now needs to know, since it feels like we're all auditioning online all the time. Whether or not we're actors, we all need to know how to look on camera suddenly. So it's definitely going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah.
Also, the head of Image Nation, which is based out of Harlem, and it's brings indie films to local communities. The founder from that is going to talk about how they're doing with their online programming and how she foresees the general theater going experience might change going forward. You know, given that so many people are now looking on online resources, are they all going to be willing to go back in the theater when this is all over? I certainly hope so, but I do think that the landscape is going to change, and we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Okay. Well, there's a lot going on, a lot to look forward to, and a lot to engage in virtually. So we can do this. And is there any advice that you would want to give to women in post in particular before we go?
I would definitely say reach out and build your support network. You can't work in a vacuum, even if sometimes it feels like it, working late at night at the editing bay. Find your tribe and stick with those people and share ideas and share resources, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this week's episode, give us a like, leave us a question or comment, and share with your friends. Your viewership and support helps promote women working in film. Follow us on Instagram, subscribe to us on YouTube, and join our Patreon community. Interested in being a guest or sponsor on the show? Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. See you next week on Women in Post.